Hello and a very warm welcome to our Q&A with Head Gardener Ed Reed and Custos Hortolorum Professor Jennifer Green. My name is Max and I'm an MBA student here at St. Hugh's. I'm delighted to be here today to find out more about the beautiful college gardens and to put just some of the many questions we've had from our alumni to Ed and Jennifer. For me personally, the gardens have been a constant source of joy throughout my time here at St. Hugh's. I remember when I first arrived at college and what an impact the beautiful diversity of the gardens has had on me. Over this past year of lockdowns, they've proved to be an especially valuable source of respite from the stresses of the outside world and from academic work. Whether for a quick walk between online lectures or for some leisure time with a novel in the sun, I'm sure all of the students have been especially appreciative of the gardens this year. As an avid gardener myself, the array of unusual and rare plants we have and watching the gardens change throughout the seasons has been something that I will always remember about my time at Oxford. To kick us off, Ed and Jennifer, do you have a favourite spot in the gardens of St. Hugh's?
Well, mine has to be the herbaceous border. We've done a lot of refurbishment work over the last 4 years, and I think it's something myself and the team can be especially proud of. Steve certainly has done a lot of great work in the herbaceous border. I think some of the main highlights have to be the eupatorium, the cephalaria, and one of my favourite plants is the Sanguisorbia lilac squirrels, which has its flowers actually do look like squirrel tails, so it's quite an interesting plant and it looks especially nice in July.
Well, for me, it's probably the row of beech trees. It's rumoured that they were originally a hedge, but when the main building was built in 1916, they were already quite mature. The one by the library, which was particularly magnificent, died in the mid-1970s when it was particularly hot weather. But it was replaced with a semi-mature one, which is now really quite big and very handsome. In the spring, they look particularly lovely because there are a lot of crocuses which self-seed underneath them, and also it's planted some tulips, and it looks particularly nice in that season.
Jennifer, I imagine there will be some members of our community who are not familiar with what you do in your role as Custos Hortolorum. Could you tell us a bit about the post and its significance in the history of St. Hugh's?
Well, my job is to support the gardeners and to liaise with governing body over gardening matters. The first Custos was a fellow called Annie Rogers, and she was particularly important in the forming and development of the garden. She was very keen on flowering trees and shrubs, and she found some particularly rare ones which are now in the garden. Also, it's said to be the case that she acquired cuttings from other college gardens which she subsequently nurtured in St. Hugh's. During her tenure, the college acquired much of the present site, adding to the original garden in the Mount, which was where the main building was built, and she had to integrate these additional spaces into the garden. She died in 1937, and the role fell into abeyance until 1952, I think it was, when Miss Proctor, the then principal, took it over. But there was continuity over that period because we had a head gardener, a man called George Harris, who was employed by the college from 1927 to 1972, and he actually became head gardener very early on in 1934. And during the war, when we were requisitioned as a head hospital, he was employed and he was able to carry on looking after the trees and shrubs. After Miss Proctor, subsequent custoses were Honor Smith, Mary Lunt, and John Isles. And over that period, you can see they had particularly long tenures, which shows what a pleasant job it is. However, there's definitely no weeding on the job description.
And Ed, You had a team of really talented gardeners, keeping the college grounds looking absolutely incredible. Could you tell us about your team and talk us through some of the challenges of maintaining the grounds of such a large site?
Well, I am very lucky. I've got a fantastic team. We are we are a small team. There's only 3 of us, and they are actually really talented gardeners. Steve kind of concentrates mainly on the sort of herbaceous side of things, and Mike sort of got a real interest in lawns, so he does a lot of the cylinder mowing. But it is a challenge in the summer, especially with the noise restrictions due to exams and conferences. But the college has invested very heavily in electric machinery. And we've also laid leaky hoses on a lot of the planting schemes, which helps out with the watering and relieves that burden over the summer months.
Are there any other gardens that you take inspiration from for the St Hugh's Gardens?
I've always been a great admirer of Simon's work at Worcester College. Simon started off at at Trinity College, where I did my apprentice, so I've known him a very long time, and he's been a great friend and mentor to me over the years. One of my other favourite gardens is Rowstrom House in Oxfordshire, which I first visited as an apprentice when I was doing a garden design course, and it's one of the few surviving William Kent gardens, so it's a must check if you're in the Oxfordshire area.
We are chatting today in the beautiful Fellows and Senior Members Garden, right next to the Principal's Lodgings. I think it's fair to say that this garden in particular has been very much shaped by the St Hugh's community, and especially by our alumni. Jennifer, could you tell us a bit about this garden and its history?
Yep, sure. The current site of this garden was originally part of the very large garden of the house called the Shrubbery, which is now the Principal's Lodgings. The site was acquired by the college at the beginning of the Second World War and was immediately requisitioned and was used as an American Army club. When the Maison Francaise occupied the building at the end of the war, the large part of the garden was retained by the college and was used as the Fellows' Garden. It had a sunken rose garden, it had a lily pond, and 3 large greenhouses, which St George Whitehead, who laid out the garden, used to grow special plants in, but Harris used it to grow tomatoes. When Maplethorpe was built, it was turned over, half of it was turned over to form the drive to the Maplethorpe building, and the rest of it became very neglected. We were very fortunate to be offered a generous gift by the family of Catherine Elliott in memory of her. Also, Theo Cooper, an economics tutor at the college, in her will left money for the upkeep of the Fellows' Garden. And with the combination of these 2 gifts, we were able to remodel the garden, and it is more or less as it is today. Additional very significant gifts were the Whitehead gates. They were donated by Sue Clear, who was an undergraduate, read mathematics, and she was the granddaughter of St George Whitehead. The gates were designed by Clive Sanderson, and they feature rose and honeysuckle and other plant forms twining up through the gate. The stunning summer house was donated by Ilse Kagan, who read modern languages in 1946. The garden was reopened as the Fellows and Senior Members Garden in 2011 on the 125th anniversary of the college.
Ed, could you tell us a bit about the scheme in this garden, and is there anything specific you and your team would recommend that alumni check out when they're visiting?
Yeah, of course. I guess the scheme is to create a tranquil oasis for the fellows and the alumni that are visiting, and to also teaching. But I especially like the transition from the woodland area into the open lawn area with the herbaceous plants and the shrubs. 2 of my highlights are definitely probably the Colberteria tree, which is about to flower probably by the end of the month and into August, and the Viburnum plicatum, which looks especially great in May. We've also planted some hawthorn hedges at the back of the Fellows' Garden as a habitat for the wild brown hair streak butterfly, And the Oxford butterfly community regularly come out and count the eggs and the larvae at certain times of year.
On that note of butterflies, we've had lots of questions about biodiversity in the gardens. How is the team working to increase biodiversity across the site?
Well, we've left some areas long, so we don't mow through the summer. We've also planted bulbs in those areas to add interest. And we've also removed some areas of lawn and planted wildflower meadow seed, which has been very successful. I think it's looking particularly good at the moment.
And is it tricky to balance these efforts with maintaining the more manicured look of the gardens, which members of the community might be more used to?
Well, I actually think it's improved many areas. It's added interest, added colour and interest at certain times of the year. It's also allowed us to cut down on the mowing. But I've had to change my mindset, certainly coming from modelling where everything was very manicured. But I actually think there's a lot of beauty in the long grass areas, especially in spring.
And are there any other sustainability initiatives which the team has been working on?
Yeah, we've recently undertaken a biodiversity audit in conjunction with the wider university. And we've also started using our own homemade liquid feeds on the lawn, consisting of seaweed extract and garlic. Yeah, we're also composting about 80% of our waste at the moment, which we tend to mulch and use on the herbaceous border. And all hardwood prunings we wood chip. So tree surgeons come in and wood chip these up for us, and we use them as weed control throughout the summer.
And Jennifer, your connection to the gardens of St. Hugh's began in 1960 when you were here as a chemistry undergraduate. Do you recall what the gardens meant to you as a student in the 60s, and what are some of the biggest changes that you've witnessed over the years?
I remember the gardens being very large and beautiful. The aspect was rather different in those days because all the walled gardens of the houses and around the site were still intact. There was an area which looked like allotments where Harris grew vegetables, and we used to have rhubarb from there for our lunch. He also apparently used to keep pigs, but they weren't there any longer when I was an undergraduate. I remember playing tennis and croquet in the gardens, and also working there when the weather was fine. They've changed a lot, the pressure mainly becoming from building in order to house all our undergraduates and as many graduates as we could. The houses along St Margaret's Road were replaced by the Kenyon and the Rachel Trickett building. The gardens of the houses along the Woodstock Road became the main lawn when Maplethorpe was built. The site of the tennis court changed a number of times, and regrettably eventually it was lost when the China Centre was built. However, we still have a very nice croquet lawn, very manicured croquet lawn outside MGA. The original garden of the Mount, opposite main building, with the terrace, the lawn, the trees around it, the dell and the beech tree row, they're all still there.
And Ed, one feature of the gardens which so many of our alumni and friends will be familiar with is the armistice tree, the Magnolia solengiana, on the lawn outside of the main building. This was presented to the college by students to celebrate the armistice of 1918. We all look forward to it blooming every spring. Ed, what are some of the challenges of looking after this very historical and very significant tree?
Well, it is naturally declining due to age, but it's really benefited recently from a dead wood carried out by our tree surgeons. And over the dry summer months, we often lay a hose down and give it a good soaking, and also a feed. I've also discussed with the tree surgeons recently about drilling down and adding a hormone to the roots to invigorate the growth.
It was very much in danger during the war because the buildings for the head hospital came up very close to it. But because Harris was there looking after our trees and shrubs, I'm sure he took particular care of that tree.
Do either of you have an idea of which plants might be the oldest in the garden?
Difficult question. I mean, I'm sure the row of beech trees must be some candidate if they were pretty mature in 1916. How about you, Ed?
I think probably the turkey oak, which is at the front of 89, hanging over the Banbury Road. I believe when the tree surgeons last did the survey, they calculated it to be over 200 years old.
Ed, speaking of these older trees, is there an ongoing plan for replacing and replenishing trees in the garden?
Yes, we work very closely with the Tree Preservation Officer and the Oxford Council. And usually when we ever carry out tree work or have to take a tree out, it's often stipulated that we must plant trees in their stead. But I always try to plant at least 3 or 4 trees each year because we've got the grounds to do that. And it's also a great way of offsetting carbon as well.
We've had lots of questions about the centenary rose that was named for St. Hugh's and whether it still exists on the college site. Jennifer, do you know what happened to the rose and whether it's still available?
The St. Hugh's rose was specially bred by Mattox for us, and it was planted originally in the bed under the end of the library, and for a number of years it looked really lovely. However, it didn't thrive there, and unfortunately Mattox no longer offers it. But as a result of our ask for questions from the alumni, we have had an offer from someone who actually still has this rose living in their garden for cuttings. So we're going to follow up on that, and we hope to be able to re-establish the rose in the garden.
Ed, what developments in the gardens are you most excited about, and what are your big plans for the upcoming year?
Well, we've recently installed a water feature. I think it's really improved the area outside the bursary and also provided a great source of water for the birds and other wildlife in the area. We've also been donated some money, so we're looking to install a rose arbour and replace some of the roses. And we're also looking to procure some obelisks and plant some clematis up them throughout the MGA borders to provide some height and interest.
I know that you've been running lots of well-being activities in the gardens for students over the recent months. Could you perhaps tell us a bit about those and any other opportunities there are for students to get involved at the gardens?
Well, the wellbeing events have proven to be really popular, and we get quite a large number of students attend the different events. We do various things such as pumpkin carving in the autumn, we make holly wreaths at Christmas, and the flower arranging events are always really popular. But I think it's also important for us to be sort of, very friendly to students, because a lot of them are away from home for their first time and maybe missing their family. So it's quite nice to, chat to them and help them out where we can.
We could go on chatting all day about the gardens, but I think that we'll have to end it here. Thank you so much to both of you for sharing your insights into the gardens at St. Hugh's. It's been so fascinating to learn about our beautiful grounds and the amazing work that you do to maintain them.
Thank you very, very much, Max.
Thanks. If people are interested in following your team's progress in the gardens, Ed, where can they find out more?
Well, we write a regular blog called Hughes Horticulture, and that can be found on the college website.
Thank you so much to everyone who suggested questions for this video. I'm sorry that we weren't able to get to all of them. We hope that you've enjoyed watching and that it won't be too long before you're able to come back to St. Hugh's and enjoy the gardens in person. Thank you, and bye for now.